Hi everybody, it's Kimberly here and welcome to my channel, the Send Me to Unite channel, where I've been sharing some of my insights lately on a series called The Awakening, Ascension and The Event. And I think I should be able to finish up in just another couple episodes. So thank you all for joining, for sharing, for liking, subscribing, and getting this information out. It is really important actually, because first of all, I do know and understand that most of the people who watch my channel are here originally because of following along, because of identifying with the twin flame or divine partner mission. But we're all starseeds, we're all light workers, and as others are coming and watching this information as well, we all incarnated here for a special purpose, and that was to help Earth with this process of ascension and the event that's coming. One of the things I want to talk about just briefly that I didn't touch on before, but it fits in with all of this, is why our Earth kind of ended up with such a big, really one of the most dramatic and difficult experiences and ability to shift of any other world that is actually, at least in our galaxy, is what we're told. And I'm not going to go into it in great detail. If you listen to one of my recordings where I've channeled some information about who are we, who we really are, and why are we here. And I do touch on it briefly there, but I do want to bring it in here. And this comes from the Law of One and from other sources as well, and is confirmed by people who do have contact with extraterrestrials or higher beings that actually have do have information and access to the whole story. But this is something that people on Earth overall, the information that we're given, the history that we are allowed to have on a mainstream basis is not accurate. It doesn't tell the whole story. They're hiding from us the fact that there has been extraterrestrial contact with human beings on Earth throughout all time and record. But there's very, very ancient ruins all over the Earth of that show very, very higher level civilizations, extraterrestrials. Evidence is everywhere. It's very clear. And through that whole long story about who we really are and why we're at the point that we are, it's relevant to what's happening now. And this is, we're going to go back into what I talked about briefly before, that of course the event is an energetic shift that's taking place. It's a big peak in energy that happens at a specific what Alexei Dmitriev calls a domain. And right now I'm blanking out on the other word that goes with it, but it's a specific place. It's based on sacred geometry that in and of itself it creates highly energized helium gas. It's out there. NASA calls it local fluff. It's over 6,000 degrees Celsius, and we're entering it right now. Highly energized, very hot, magnetically energized helium gas. And I believe that the reason that gas is there is because this there's something activating. There are certain points of these domains that activate energy that's literally everywhere, but it activates right there. And it's specifically set up in order to create dimensional shifts. So we're entering in one of that point right now. It's based on about a 25,600 year cycle. We just usually shorten it to 25,000 year grand cycle. That is the same it's called the precession of the equinoxes, which is the same as the ages of the zodiac, where there's 12 ages of the zodiac that last approximately 2,600 years each, and then that, or roughly, and then that adds to the 25,600 year cycle that we're hitting. And when we come into that energetic zone, it literally, our sun is energized, and then our sun, ends up creating huge amounts of change within its solar system, and it's basically like clockwork. I mean, it truly is. It's gears, and it's cycles of things that when they all line up, things truly change. Now, our Earth and all the people on it are currently in third dimension. We're shifting into fourth dimension. There's always a process of one dimension to another, and there are in this grand cycle of things, there's a total, like, major grand cycle of 75,000 or 76,000 years, which is the total sum of 3 of these grand cycles here. So we do this times 3. And that equals 75,000 years, and at the end of the 75,000 years, then third dimension is over. And we've come to that. We had our first 25,000 year cycle a long time, 75,000 years ago, or 50,000 years ago it ended. And then the second one, so what the Law of One, which is one of my major resources for information, is the lawof1.org, channeled information from a group of beings who called themselves Ra, and it was channeled in 1981. And it has proven itself over and over to have been correct when they were talking about scientific information that wasn't yet known. And David Wilcock is another major source of my information. So you can look him up on Gaia.com, watch his episodes, read his books, and a lot of this information is there as well. So the end of the third dimensional reality is what we've come to at this point by having succeeded in 3 cycles of 25,000 years. And I'm going to show you just really briefly here what that really should have looked like. So I will probably go into just a little bit about why we've had such a problem. In a normal situation, first of all of the planets and all of the realms in the entire solar system, in our entire galaxy and in the entire universe, go through the same process of ascension, where all beings and life forms are being pushed through a process of growth into higher and higher consciousness levels as they go through these dimensions. And this is very scientific. It's not like some crazy thing. There's plenty of evidence for it, like the Cambrian explosion and so forth. There was always known, and it boggles the minds of Darwinian evolutionists, because they're going along here, and there's about this much, life forms and complexity and everything, and then suddenly there's this much. And those shifts are always in very giant jumps. And before I was going to do what I was going to do here, we're going to go into this. There's something else that one of the scientists, and David Wilcock talks about this, I'm going to briefly touch on it, that another proof for the fact that there are basically quantum leaps and shifts and change in energy levels, and this can be seen in what is called redshift. So if you're familiar at all, my dad was a physicist, and I remember him talking to me about redshift, and then I studied it in astronomy. And redshift there's a theory about why redshift exists. Now, this theory that I'm briefly going to outline is the accepted theory for why we see redshift, but it's not correct. And there's so much evidence that points to the fact that this is a theory currently that is not correct and makes no sense, that for scientists to hang on to it is literally like, it makes no sense, except from the fact that if they acknowledge that this redshift theory is not true, then it also blows apart their theory of the Big Bang as being the source of all things and the beginning of creation. And it also blows apart their cover for them they don't want us to know that we're headed toward this consciousness shift. And that's because the knowledge and the information on our world is being controlled by people who've chosen the negative path. And so because they've chosen the negative path, they have to, that is what the negative path is, in order for them to ascend, they have to, in their own lives, have an excess of service to self. They have to be 95% service to self in order to ascend into the next dimension. And in order to do that, they have to control others. They have to manipulate. They have to enslave. They have to, demean, demoralize, push down. They will perform the most perverse acts against humanity. This is where we get, all of the most evil things, the things that we consider evil on our earth, come from people who have chosen the negative path. So for them to acknowledge that redshift isn't what they say it is, it blows everything out of the water. So David Wilcock talks about this and the different scientists who have discovered this and who've proven this, and how they were oppressed, suppressed, and everything was done to try to stifle their information that came out. Because instead of redshift theory, which says that stars that are traveling farther away from us have a shift toward the blue, and then others that are coming toward us have the shift toward the red light. And that was initially accepted as true, but there's a big problem with that, because what happens is that entire galaxies will have, instead of like if there's a whole galaxy and a group of stars that's supposedly traveling toward us, it would be shifted toward the red. That would have a red shift. And that's the same as the Doppler effect, where, when you hear a siren going by and it's high at first because it's coming toward us. Actually, I'm sorry. That would be shifted blue. If it's coming toward us, it'd be shifted towards the blue light. And that's like when you hear, the higher pitch sound, and then as the siren goes by you, it's lower, and then as it leaves you, it gets lower and lower still. And that they're saying that redshift, the shift in the light waves that we see, has to do with whether that star or group of stars is coming toward us quickly or going away from us quickly. And the part that doesn't make sense, and why this completely is blown out of the water, is that in a whole entire galaxy, instead of that entire galaxy having stars that, and we all understand that the shape of galaxies, lots of different shapes of galaxies, but let's say we're looking at an elliptical galaxy here, and it kind of has like this really glowing center, and it's 3D in the sense that it will have, kind of like a ball like this, but it will really have, a lot more stars along this whole plane here. And if redshift theory, as it's currently known, is correct, then all of the stars in that galaxy should have the same shift toward either red or blue, if they're going away from us or coming toward us fast. But the problem is they don't. If they go in there and they look at each individual star in different areas, they see a complete variation, and they also see it that the older stars here toward the center are at a different shift of color than the ones farther out here, or the ones in the middle, wherever they're at. It's different. And so then, in order to try to explain that away, then they had this finger of God theory, which basically said, okay, here's us on Earth. And one thing we've noticed is that every galaxy kind of has this variation, from red to blue within a galaxy. And so really, instead of galaxy looking like this, instead of galaxy basically looks like this. It's like cone-shaped. That's how it really looks. And here we're seeing one color, and then out here are the stars that we're seeing another color, but we're seeing them in it's crazy. It doesn't make sense. Like, basically they're saying is that our world is at the center of everything. Because you guys, I know that most of you aren't scientists enough to understand what I'm just telling you, but just trust me on it. Unless you want to look into it more, do so. It doesn't make sense. So I don't know the science name. I'm just telling you all this off the top of my head. So go into David Wilcock to find the resources. The scientist who, there's a couple of them. One was a British guy, and then I don't remember the other one, maybe Russian, who started realizing that redshift actually had to do with this idea of space domains, that every star is, in its pathway through its own galaxy, keeps hitting these areas, and every time it hits an area, there's a leap in the frequency of the star. Like, this is measurable. This actually 100% proves that this event, if we don't have enough proof already, this proves that, there are shifts that take place, and they're very regular. Like, in a galaxy itself, you can see, where those stars are in their paths, and where they'll hit those different shifts that has to do with their whole design, their whole cycle and everything. It's very regular, and it is so predictable that the scientist who discovered this process, and he calculated the numbers, and he predicted where stars would be within their galaxy, and then when they would have these leaps that would go from one frequency of light to a higher frequency, which is higher density, to a higher frequency, which is higher density still. Those were so accurate that you could just about lay a template over any single galaxy, and they always fall into that exact same accurate shifts that take place. There's something underlying this that if our current scientists don't take a look at it and aren't just mind blown by how incredible this information is and how it changes everything, and how much how much wealth of knowledge, if we allow for this to be true instead of sticking to the old redshift theory that basically is their proof for the Big Bang, that this opens up a whole new door of incredible information and knowledge and understanding. So here are a couple of things that they discovered and they understand about these quantized shifts of light frequency for stars. That the older the star is, they change in their light frequency, and they're changed by numbers that were absolutely pure multiples of, I believe, and I may be mistaken here, but I think they're like Fibonacci numbers. The sacred golden mean is in those numbers, and they're always in big jumps. So it's not like you saw a gradual, like here's a graph here, and here's stars at this level of energy, and you saw them just go up like this. It wasn't like that at all. Like if you were looking and plotting all of the stars in a particular galaxy on a graph, that's not how it went. It went like this. There'd be a lot of stars that were here, and then there would be stars that were up here. And then there would be stars that were up here. And then there'd be stars up here, again, in like the level of the amount of their frequency of light, and I'm not going to go into details because I don't know them off the top of my head. But this is really, really incredibly important and great information to understand, that the leap and the change in the frequency that the star is putting out, in its pulse of energy and the frequency of that energy, it would be at one level, and then it would be another, and it would be another, and it would be another. And so what the scientists, they hadn't been reading the Law of One, and they hadn't been like delving into, all the different world religions that talk about this, light frequency change that shifts consciousness, but they came to the exact same conclusion. These are like basically atheist scientists who, science is their religion. They don't believe in necessarily all, powerful, intelligent being designing behind everything. And yet they came to the conclusion that in delving into what would be the effect of this leap in frequency of the light that's being emanated by a given star, that they said it would cause a consciousness shift and a physical change on all of the life forms on the planets that were around those stars. I'm going to say that again because this is super important. This is super important. Atheist scientists who discovered and debunked redshift theory and realized that stars shift periodically over time in giant leaps of frequency in the amount of the frequency of the light they're emitting. They said the results on the planets around those stars would be a consciousness shift, a higher consciousness, and a change in physical change in the life forms on that planet. So that's just one more level of proof, scientific proof, that the frequency of the light is changing, and it's changing us. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to, I think what I was talking about was the negative and the positive path. So the Law of One was talking, oh yes, this is where I was at. The history, sorry, I really digressed there. Okay, so the history of our Earth is thus. In the normal scheme of things, you would have 3 25,000-year cycles. And at the end of each 25,000-year cycle, it's the end of the precession of this equinoxes, and this light starts coming in that ends up pushing all of the life forms on Earth to change, elevate their consciousness levels. And the way it worked is this, the way it's supposed to work. End of the first 25,000 years, you'd have, here's all the beings on Earth, and let's say how many of them are ready to shift and go into, let's say they're not ready at all. Can you see over here? They're not ready at all for ascension over here. They're just starting their very first, 3D, and they're very much like the caveman, and they're subsistence living, and they're learning lessons, and they're growing, and they're, So then they gradually get more and more in higher levels of consciousness, and maybe ETs come and teach them things that they need to know and help them, that every time they get more information, it helps boost their consciousness and their understanding of all that is, and so their consciousness is increasing. And then here comes the first shift. And that is the amount of light energy there that will help about that many people shift into the next dimension. And then the next shift comes like this, and most of the people that are left are able to shift and change to the next dimension. And then we have all the people who are still left, and then the rest of them finally shift and change into the next dimension. And what happens on a given planet during this whole entire time, this Earth is staying in third dimension, 3D. The world that all these people live on stays in 3D during this is 3D timing. But at the end of this time, Earth, or the world that they're on, goes to the next dimension, which is 4D. And so the Earth itself experiences the change. So what happened on our Earth, and I'm not going to go into the details of why, but it has to do with several factors. One, our Earth is located in a very prime state of a place of real estate for the whole entire galaxy. It's at a place that's very close to, a wormhole pathway, whatever, dimensional, where people can travel, just on the outskirts of our solar system is a place where they can go to all kinds of other areas of the galaxy very easily. So it's useful for that. And then also, so that was one, so our location, the location of, it's just a very prime location. And because we're located in a prime location, we're also very desirable for other, I can't spell when I'm talking, we're very desirable. And so whether the negative or positive beings, they're wanting where we're at. They want to set up hotels here. They want to set up, it's a great layover station. It's a place to do trade. It's a good place to be and to have territory. Just like human beings will discover new land and they want to put their stake, their flag on it. And they want to have it for themselves. So that was another reason that we had a lot of interaction from other beings here on our Earth. If we'd been tucked away in some other corner of the galaxy, which was not like the greatest place to, come and go, then we wouldn't have had much traffic and we wouldn't have had much going on, and so we would have gone in this normal, progression through the shift into the fourth dimension. So the location was desirable, so people wanted to be here. And then third of all, because of this, these all are connected, because we were, a lot of people were coming here and doing things here and interacting with us, then it did cause a lot of problems. And they were many. They were connected to many things and many, going way back in history, not only on our own planet, but other planets within our galaxy, because our solar system, because our whole solar system is in a place that people were really interacting with. And, as you probably are aware, the planet Mars and Maldek were, actually Mars was a moon. It was a satellite of Maldek. And it was inhabited, of course. It was a beautiful place to live, and Maldek was as well. Maldek was a really, really big planet, and they were fighting with each other. They had wars, and I don't know the details. I think there's a lot more to the story than most people have access of information to. But basically, Maldek blew up, and it was as a result of whatever it was they were doing. I personally believe that it had something to do with AI. One of the stories I have heard about Maldek is that they were getting really into having like these little nanites that would do and create and make everything for them. They were basically little tiny robots, or bigger ones as well, but even these little tiny robots would, if they wanted anything to be created, and they were just third dimensional beings. They hadn't gone into fourth dimension yet, as far as I understand. And if they wanted anything to be created, they could just have their little AI nanites created all within just a very short amount of time. But the problem was it's likely that their AI actually started to get commandeered by, there is such thing as an AI signal that emanates from some other place. It's not even from our own universe, it's from somewhere else, but it emanates throughout everywhere. And that AI signal basically will commandeer any higher levels of artificial intelligence and basically turn it into a malicious force that will eventually have as it's designed to overtake people and to kill people. I don't know for sure if that's why Maldek got destroyed or not, but in any case, Mars and Maldek destroyed each other, and so all of the souls that were there, many of them were relocated to Earth. In fact, I think it's approximately 20 or 30% of souls living and alive on Earth right now actually originated on Mars. We don't have very many Maldek. Maldek was really treated a little differently because they were the ultimate cause of the destruction of their own planet and of Mars. And so they were actually demoted farther than just being, going to straight into, earth bodies as souls and reincarnating on earth. They were actually demoted to kind of like a caveman level of, like Neanderthal. And so, like, it's a lower consciousness level, and they had to work their way forward out of that level, for a longer period of time. I'm just seeing the time here, and I'm almost up for what I wanted to do the length of my video. So basically, just in a nutshell, the time it took Earth to progress through this graph, instead of it going in a bell curve like it should have, what happened was, because of all these a lot of different commotion, strife, dynamics. I mean, again, there's no judgment. Everything happens. It just is what it is. But instead of it being in a bell curve, when we had our first 25,000-year cycle, from all the trauma, from the souls who came here from Mars, and then how we interacted with each other, from Earth souls and the Mars souls, and then other souls that were imported from other places that needed to be, because of all of that dynamic, there was nobody ready for ascension. So the first 25,000 years, instead of having maybe a quarter of the population ascend, we had 0. So then the second 25,000 years happened, or at 50,000 years at that shift. And instead of like some people being ready, I think from the law of one, they say there were only like about 100, or from 50 to 200, I don't remember for sure, that were ready to ascend. And we're talking about out of millions of people that were alive. I don't know. There weren't as many people alive on Earth at that time. But of the souls who were alive, or even who had passed on, because even if when a planet goes through ascension, even souls who are attached with it are part of this planet. If they're not incarnated, they still go through the ascension process if they're ready. So that was all that was ready. And those souls, because Earth and nobody else was ready to go, they volunteered to stay. And so they basically now, most of them have ascended and become ascended masters, but they stayed and reincarnated for a long time to help Earth in preparation for our ascension right now. So this is why ascension on Earth right now is so crazy, why it's incredibly challenging, and it's also why so many starseeds chose to incarnate in preparation for a number of lifetimes, and then finally incarnate now for preparation of this ascension event, because there's so many souls who need to ascend, and yet we're still not making the decision. So basically, the question then remains: what about ascension? Like, what causes ascension, or what happens at ascension? And because I mentioned before that this third dimension, from going from third dimension to fourth dimension, is about the choice. And it's about choosing whether you're going to make, go progress on a positive service to others path, which is the right-hand positive path, or the negative left-hand path, which is service to self. And that's what we're here for. So the question is, right now, what's going on with Earth and with the beings on Earth? How many people are ready for ascension? How many people have made their choice? Because what happens to people who don't either polarize enough to the positive path or polarize enough to the negative path? What happens to them? I'm going to answer those questions in my next episode, so we'll go and we'll take a closer look at that. So thank you guys again for watching and subscribing to my channel, and I hope that you're enjoying this information as I present it.